Okay guys, so this is a real treat for me selfishly, but for you guys in TXG. So we have Chris Voshall here from Mizuno.
Great to see you.
Great to see you, buddy.
Absolutely.
Not seen you since the PGA show. I'm sure you've been a busy guy.
It's been a good couple, I guess, month and a half or so since the PGA show. It goes quick.
It feels like it's, to me, you know, the PGA show feels like such a long time ago now,
Right.
and it's amazing. So. Great start to the season for Mizuno. Let's kind of touch on that first. On tour, first and foremost, bunch of wins so far. Casey, Keith Mitchell. Talk to me a little bit about that stuff.
It's always fun to get the validation out on tour, and in all honesty, that's somewhere where Mizuno has been lacking over the last couple of years.
Right,
but it's something that we've really tried to focus on lately, and we want to get more people playing our stuff, more exposure to them, and more exposure to more of the clubs.
Right.
And that's where the Keith Mitchell win was such an awesome thing. First win for a Mizuno driver on tour since Vijay Singh in the year 2000.
Was it really?
It really was, almost 20 years.
Holy
It was really, really cool.
What was Vijay's driver back then? Was he using MP001?
It was before that. He was playing the old 300S.
300S, I remember it, absolutely.
It's a great driver.
That's incredible. I mean, I was pulling so hard for Keith Mitchell on that last 9 because I wanted him to win, because I knew that would elevate the story of the driver and him putting that in play. And tell me a little bit about that process and how he ended up getting that one in play.
So that was a really fun story, just because he's the type of guy who, if he can find something that's better, he's going to try it. But ultimately, Mizuno's, we've always had our contracts have always said, players are required to test stuff when we ask them to test it. But it had gotten into a cadence where the players were almost going through the motions with our drivers. We want them to test them, we want them to try them, we want to get their feedback and use it. But ultimately, we don't require anybody to use it. We hadn't required anybody, so it was just, you know, I'll test it for you and we'll get some numbers. So we met Keith down at the down at TPC Sawgrass. I guess it was in probably July or August of last year.
Right. Wow.
So it was a while back, and then it was just early testing. The head was pretty much done, and it was just final tweaks of it. And he went down there. He said he would do the testing, and he hit it. And he really was kind of caught off guard by the numbers he got out of it. Better ball speed, more consistency, and ultimately it was a driver that fell from left to right for him.
Which is his shape. He wants to see it going that way. And generally the guys with more speed, we're seeing a real trend of that. People who kind of have a little bit of yardage to give away. They don't have to be optimized. You know, they're looking for a functional ball flight rather than an optimal ball flight. And he's one of those guys.
That's exactly right. He's the type of guy who brings mid 180s in ball speed out there. So he hits it plenty far, and he's okay to give up 3 or 4 yards if he can see the ball fall from left to right and just have that much more control over it. And ultimately, he hit it and was like, well, when can I play this? And then he, you know, it didn't go into the conforming list until I think it was October of last year. So we had to wait. He had to sit on it for a little bit. But all that did was really get him even more excited as he tested with it. And then for him to be the first guy to really, I mean, in all honesty, take a chance on a Mizuno driver and then get a win with it, that meant so much for the entire company. So it was really good.
It's such a neat thing. And it's important to add that these guys are so reluctant to change unless something has got better. Right. So, you know, people, the average golfer can sometimes tinker because they just want a new product. They just want to tinker away. These guys will not do that, will they?
You're exactly right. And it's funny, there's a handful of guys who are tinkerers out there, but it feels like the guys who end up as Mizuno guys are almost the opposite of that. We get guys who are very, I know what my clubs do, I want them to keep doing that. I'm not going to change unless you can show me something visibly and measurably better. So we always struggle. It's funny, you'll see some of the other companies come out and all of a sudden week 1 there'll be X number in play. We usually don't do that. Ours is usually more of a slow burn as we get them in. And that's just because we want to show the measurable increase. We honestly, we could care less if somebody's playing the absolute newest, latest, greatest. We want them to play their best golf and represent us best. So we're going to keep working until we can show them that improvement. And then we know that they'll put it in then and hopefully get the best results.
So have we had other players since Keith put it in play on the PGA Tour?
We have. So actually Luke Donald's playing it, and he actually had a great finish last week.
That was great to see.
Which was awesome.
I know. I think all of us are pulling pretty hard for Luke to come back. And you know, he's such a familiar face, and as a Brit, obviously to see him playing well again. you kind of feel for someone like Luke, because in the window where he was so effective, probably 6-7 years ago, the game has kind of transitioned into this power game, and
it has.
You worry about him coming back in and kind of how he fits into that mold. I can see a Keith Mitchell being a real competitive player, but how does Luke sort of fit back into that?
It was funny. You actually saw him. He was actually tweeting the other day after the players ended.
Yeah.
He was tweeting about Jim Furyk hitting hybrids into clubs that Rory was hitting 9-irons into. And I know like Luke kind of feels that a little bit because it's such a power game right now, and he's built his game not on power but on precision.
Sure.
So to see him be able to harness that and drive it better, hit great irons, and get some of that short game back that he's just, world class at.
Unbelievable.
It's fun.
Yeah, we were at Open Forum on the Monday night, the Tuesday of the PGA show, and Mark Brody's there, and he's talking about Luke. And I think most people's perception was something happened with Luke's swing, and he was going from Pat Goss to Chuck Cook. And he was working in some different things, and I'm sure those were all very important, but it was when Mark Brody presented Luke's putting stats from when he was world number 1 to where he was in 2016 and 17. A lot of his strokes gained, or his loss in the strokes gained category, had came from putting.
You're exactly right.
So he thought that he was kind of putting more. So he was becoming more and more tentative, and Mark Brody was able to show him, look, it's actually you've become tentative and you're leaving yourself more short putts. You're no longer getting the ball to or past the hole, so your putts never have a chance to go in. So you used to hole a lot of those mid to long range putts. Now you hole none because you're becoming more and more tentative. Pat Goss devised some strategies for him and got him back on track. And in 2018, I think for the few events he played, there wasn't many, his putting stats were through the roof again.
And it's going to be amazing to see if he gets back to his old putting ways. And I've seen some drills that he and Pat work on where his distance control, where he would putt one past a hole and then put the next one between that ball and the hole and the next one between that. Unbelievable. And if he can get back to putting like that, ultimately, Luke Donald's not going to win tournaments because he gains 5 yards off the tee.
That's right.
He's going to win tournaments because he gets his putting back. So to see him refocus on that, and I know Pat was with him this past week out at the transitions. So they were working on things, and obviously it's working. So it's great. We really hope that he continues to have that resurgence.
I know. No, we all do. I think the game is better with these names, playing well and competing. Let's go into kind of Mizuno on the whole. So Mizuno have become this company that in the free agents market, there's a real kind of movement towards the Mizuno kind of trailer as the fall off from certain TaylorMade contracts or maybe Nike contracts, and there was certain things happened there. Talk to me a little bit about that. So that must be so exciting for you guys to see a player who has the choice of every trailer. They can go in any direction, north, south, east, or west, and they head to you guys.
It's been amazing. Mizuno, we pounded our chests for a number of years that we were the #1 iron on tour all through most of the 90s. And then in the early 2000s is when it really became a pay-for-play thing out there. And that's when you saw TaylorMade, Callaway, Titleist, everybody come and buy up just a ton of players. So we always used to say, when players choose, they choose Mizuno. But ultimately, there had been no test of that for going on 15 years. Nike's exiting the hard goods. While there were a ton of great people at Nike, they made some great stuff. What was bad for Nike actually turned out great for us, just because it was the first true test that the industry has had of, is that claim still true? And ultimately we saw that it was. We saw so many people who used to play Nike, who now were free to play whatever they want, come to us. We've won more majors in the last 2 years than we had won in the previous 20.
It's brilliant.
And it's just because people can choose, and the top players know that with Mizuno you get consistency, you get performance, and it's just, it really makes us proud of what we're doing and show us that we're still on the right path and that we're still making clubs that we always thought they're better than everybody else, and now it's being proven that they're better than a lot.
Talk to me a little bit about the lineage with Mizuno. Obviously, the history of the forging process and kind of being really market leaders from that standpoint, and having a completely different process. And you know, from grain flow to HD and you know, all these kind of new terms that we're hearing. Well, not so much in grain flow, but HD forging. Talk to me a little bit about that stuff from a material standpoint.
So that's one of the things we take so much pride in, and a lot of that comes from our Japanese heritage of the quality and the precision that we want to put into all the products. Right. So we've had a handshake agreement with Chuo Koyo, who's our exclusive foundry for forging clubs, going on, I think we just hit 50 years forging golf clubs with them. And it's something where we work together as a team to try to elevate not only individual products, but forging as an art, forging as a technique. And that's where patents like the grain flow forging process and the grain flow forging HD process came from. Those are patents that are both Chuo and Mizuno share those patents. Right. So it's, you know, even if they were to forge something for somebody else, they couldn't use grain flow forging. Right. And ultimately, the whole thing we're trying to do is make clubs more consistent. And that's where the stretching and bending steps come in of the grain flow forging. And to take it a step further in the HD, we found a way to actually concentrate more of those grains behind the impact area. All these things sound great in theory and we can talk about them, but what they're really going to do is you're going to give more consistency from piece to piece, and ultimately where it's going to benefit a player is longer vibration. Right. And Mizuno's known for feel, and longer vibration is where that feel comes from. Vibration is viewed as such a negative by so many people in the golf industry, but ultimately if it vibrates at the right frequencies, that's how a player learns where they're striking and can really dial in a shot.
Yeah. That's feedback, isn't it? Feedback through the hands.
Exactly.
So, you know, certain buzz terms, nothing feels like a Mizuno, and the kind of player style of heads, and they've been for so long, people have identified Mizuno as the players club. Right. Enter JPX, the whole world changes. Yeah. You know, ball speeds, we have boron infused into the materials, and we're starting to work with multi-material and irons. Talk to me a little bit about that, because as that has evolved for me as somebody who's a retail and a custom fitter, it's allowed me to work with Mizuno far more now that I have access to those products.
And you're right, we were such almost a niche company in terms of all our products spoke to just the better players. Right. And you know, this is a game where golfers aren't getting younger, unfortunately. It feels like it's the opposite way. So distance is such a draw to so many players. Starting with the JPX 800 model, which was, God, I guess that's going to be almost 10, 12 years ago now. So we had the MX line forever, and MX was really just a more extreme version of MP. It was still one-piece grain flow forging. It was still very basic techniques and really not pressing the limit for COR. JPX 800 was the first one where we really focused on how can we bring wood technologies to irons and get COR, get ball speed out of them. From the 800 to the 825 to the 850 to then the 900, 950, all those clubs, we continued to improve the performance of them from one to the next. And now with the introduction of the chromoly material on our hot metal, we're getting great ball speed plus customizable, very custom fittable. The boron material in our MP allows us to take a traditional forging and get more distance out of it. Ultimately, we're looking to try to not compromise on any given area. We want to give you feel, we want to give you performance, we want to give you distance, we want to give you fitting capabilities.
We were doing filming the what's in the bag for Paul Casey earlier, and we're looking at Casey's bag, and he's got MP25 3 iron, he's got 919 Hot Metal Pro 4 iron, he's got his MP5 5 iron. I mean, he's selecting something from, you know, this range, this multitude of offerings now, and he's taking, okay, well, I need that in the 3 iron. I need the penetrating flight. That's the flight I'm looking for in the 3. And on the 4, I'm looking for that one that I can maybe flight up a little bit, and you know, those longer par 3s, or go into the 5s and that sort of thing. And then he's looking for the consistency of the blade on the MP5, and it must be so satisfying to have such a wide sort of offering to all players.
It is, and while you know, from the layman, you look at our lineup and it looks like there's a lot of overlap. But each club is designed to do something very, very specific. And Paul really is zeroed in on that, where he's taken the 25 as a golf club that's a little bit longer and it's going to hit a little bit more penetrating ball flight. Took that as his longest iron. The Hot Metal Pro fits in that window he was looking for to be able to come into a par 5 and be a more controlled long iron for really high ball flights and soft landings. And then ultimately the 5s are just precision. I want it to go exactly exactly this distance. I don't want it to go a yard further or a yard shorter. So really you see that throughout our entire line with the MP18s, from the muscle back to the split cavity to the MMC, and on the JPX from the Tour, the hot metal, and the forged. We've got all these different models, but ultimately each one does something a little bit different, and that's where a fitter can really help you unlock what's the proper combination of those irons for you.
Yeah. Talk to me about the sort of in-house conversation that goes on about club fitting, because again, as the retailer and the club fitter on my side of things, I look at so many of the things that you guys do, and I just go, thank you for doing that. Right. So, look at S18 wedges. Those come in every degree increment. That doesn't mean that you guys make them in every degree increment, but a 52 degree head with 8 degrees of bounce can quite easily be a 51.7 or a 53.9. But it allows us to fill those gaps and have those conversations a lot easier and break those down with the consumer. How did those things come about? Is that just being practical and being in the field?
So there's a lot that goes into that. You say thank you to that. Thank a guy named Bill Price, who's our director of custom fitting, and he sits in every product meeting with us, which is a really valuable thing to have, because ultimately engineers will get in a room and say, well, we want it to go this far and we don't care how we get it that far. To have basically both sides in the room, of the custom fitting side and the engineering side, it's a really nice balance of, well, we wanted to do this, but it still has to do this. So there's all sorts of, in every product we make, there's all sorts of fitting elements that are brought into it. It has to be able to be bent this many degrees. It has to be custom fittable. It has to have these head weights. It has to flow in terms of the CG from one club to the next to do this in terms of flighting. Like, all of these things are part of every single conversation. So really it goes into just our structure and how we're set up, that R&D doesn't control product, fitting doesn't control product. There's a healthy balance between those two.
There's, and as any business owner, and Mizuno as a business, your objective is not to create customers, your objective is to create raving fans. Mizuno has more raving fans than any other company, and we've seen that firsthand on the TXG YouTube channel, in that, if we don't test, I was telling you a story earlier on about our best irons of 2018 last year, and the first 4 irons we kind of put in that bracket, there was no Mizuno iron, and I thought we were going to have to shut the channel down. I thought it was going to be the end of the TXG YouTube channel, but the followers and fans are so avid. They're behind so much of the product, and they believe in it so avidly. It's fantastic to see.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we're not an overly overt marketing company. You don't see us. We don't want to be in every single shop. We don't want to be on every ad you see. We want to put that money towards the product. So it's almost like that guy who's so into Mizuno, he feels like he's into something special. Like he knows what others don't. So I think that's why people become so avid about it, because they feel like they're in the inner circle of it. And part of that comes from just how we run our company and how we spend our dollars ultimately. By putting it into the product, we know that we're getting performance, and I think we've built up a very trustworthy reputation of what we're going to put out, and that's what we always strive for. Is we want the consumer to know, if it has Mizuno on it, there's a certain level of performance, and there's some things that it's going to do. We're not just throwing the next model out there. We're trying to make the next improvement, and hopefully the consumer appreciates that and respects us for that.
No question. Something that I ask anytime I get the opportunity to talk to the people, that are in these kind of, hierarchy meetings and the high end of these companies. What's next in the club fitting industry? What's coming, and what should we look out for in the next few years?
It's funny, everything is getting more and more specialized. So, our Shaft Optimizer 3D, which we talked about earlier, we think is a really great invention to help really get more accuracy in terms of club fitting. In terms of what I see going on in the future is, especially like lofts on irons have gotten so crazy that set makeup is so poorly understood. I really expect that the next big breakthrough is going to be how does my bag look from top to bottom, as opposed to does my 7-iron fit me. So it's how does a player put something together, and that's where somewhere like TXG is so good that you can analyze the bag from the top to the bottom. And I think that really is the future of making sure you don't just have 14 perfectly fit clubs, but have 14 clubs that perfectly fit to each other so that you have 14 unique things that they do. And I feel like that's going to be the next thing, is how do you dial in every specific club from top to bottom?
I love to hear that, because that for me is where I feel like the opportunity lies in this industry. It's continuing to educate. It's continuing to talk to people about custom fitting and the ways in which we can sort of build your set around your game and your strengths and your weaknesses and your preferences. And you guys are the ones who give us the options to do that. And it's so great to hear that your philosophy kind of maps to that, and ultimately it's to the benefit of the player.
Absolutely it is. And that's where it's so frustrating when people come in and you see like the top selling irons are just the ones that go the farthest. That's not why you have irons. Irons are to go a distance. And that's where studios like this are really gaining traction, because you're not just saying, hey, here's the next model, go hit it. It's, hey, does this work for you? And how do we get this perfect for you?
Wedges. Let's kind of touch on kind of wedges. This year we've got 919 Hot Metal as a wedge that kind of complements the more forgiving, stronger lofted irons. It's got some forgiveness attributes to it.
Yeah, it's a little bit larger head, a little bit less aggressive sole grind, so a little bit more of a full sole, so you can get away with a little bit more down at the bottom. But ultimately, our S18 wedge line still lives in the line. So we've got two models of wedges. The S18, which comes in the chrome, the black, and the blue. So those are the options of the forging that, you know, to your point you said earlier, you can have it every single loft from 45 degrees all the way up to 62, whatever distance you need. So we've got those with all the fitting capabilities there. And then on the hot metal, on the JPX side, we've got the hot metal wedges that really are, it's more of a slim down, it's a simple, hey, I just want my set matching one to bring in. So it's got a little bit more forgiveness built into it, but ultimately we try to put a lot of spin generating technologies into it too. It still has the milled face, still has the quad cut grooves, still going to perform. It just doesn't have quite as many of the bells and whistles as the S18.
You literally took the words out of my mouth, and in the fitting environment, that's actually the high spin and wedge that I've worked with this year.
Oh, nice.
In any kind of fit where I'm kind of introducing 2 or 3 different models, if the 919 hot metal wedge is one that I'm offering, I don't think I've once seen it being beat for spin this year.
That's great.
Which for the player who goes, well, I'm not really trying for that, but it's kind of an added benefit, and I get the ball speed of the forgiveness around that head because it's a little bit larger. It's got some cavity element to it. I think that's such a great option for people who don't all have to be pigeonholed into the kind of smaller blade sort of shaped heads.
And that's where you've seen a lot of that wedge in the rest of the industry, that type of wedge, call it the set matching, if you will. Oftentimes it's a wedge where a lot of cost has been stripped out of it. You know, you're not doing anything to the face. It's a cast face with cast grooves, and it's just, you know, a bigger wedge that really, there's nothing specialty wedge about it. It literally looks like you took the 9 iron and put more loft and more loft and more loft. If you look at those compared to the rest of the set, it looks completely unique design, even though it still is in the hot metal family. And the reason is because we wanted to make sure it performs like a specialty wedge. So it has a unique sole shape, unique sole grind, and we took the extra steps and the extra cost to put the quad cut grooves, the face milling, all the things to give you more consistency on strikes and just more repeatable spin.
Very cool. Well, I mean, literally from top to bottom now, there's a Mizuno club to fit everyone, with the exception of the putter, which we spoke about earlier on. And in some markets there are. I wasn't aware that there was some offerings, you know, in Asia and in Europe. There's some putters, and you know, we spoke a little bit about that earlier on. But you can really see how Mizuno is kind of, it's in the conversation and for every player now, which is, it's got to be the kind of the mandate when you do this.
I mean, we started out, I'll say 5 years ago, we were the iron brand. And it was very, very firm. That was what we did. That was how we acted. That was how we spoke. We're trying to change that right now, as we want to be more than just that pretty iron brand. So that's why you're seeing so much more focus on the fitting side of things, on the wedges, on the woods, on the golf balls coming to market, all these different things, because we want to be thought of as a go-to golf company, not just a go-to iron company.
That's right. Certainly has become all-encompassing from that standpoint now. We could talk about this stuff forever, guys, but you know, we certainly have done a lot of good stuff with Christy. We've looked at 3D Optimizer, we've looked at the wood line and kind of how that has kind of come into the conversation. We've looked at What else did we look at today, Matty? With
hybrids,
hybrids.
You name it.
We've looked at all of it. Yeah, I mean, we've really covered it. We looked at the ball in detail. 2 completely different offerings on the ball.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a shocker in there for most people when it comes to the designation and how those balls react.
Right.
I can't wait to see the reaction of people with that. So all there really is left to say is thank you.
No, I really appreciate the time and the expertise you guys put in, and just the time to educate the consumer, because ultimately that's what we want to do and that's what you want to do. It's going to make us all enjoy the game better. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chris.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it, buddy.